Authentication is an important part of any application, be it web-based, desktop, or mobile application. Each kind of application has certain best practices when it comes to handling user authentication. In web-based application, this process is very important as it acts as a thin red line between the application being secure and insecure. Web applications use HTTP protocol, and HTTP is a stateless protocol. This means that each HTTP request is considered an independent request, and no information from the previous request is saved. For example, let's say that we are shopping on Amazon.com. If we add certain items to our shopping cart, then we should be able to see all the items, even after we navigate to a different page on Amazon. In this case, each time a request is sent to the Amazon server from the client needs to send its credentials. So we need to send our login information each time an HTTP request is made to the server. As you can see, this is not really a good practice. To solve this issue, session-based authentication comes into the picture. It is also known as cookie-based authentication. Now in this sequence diagram, we will see the steps involved in the cookie-based authentication. The first step, the user, which normally is the browser, sends a request to the server. The request contains the login credentials, the username and password for that user. The web server authenticates the user. If the user is valid, it creates a session and stores all the information about the user in memory or in a database, and returns a session ID to the user using something called a cookie in the HTTP response. This session ID is stored then by the user in the browser cookies. The next time the user makes a request, it sends the cookies as well in the HTTP header. Now the web server validates this session ID and the cookie and checks it with the in-memory session ID. If it's valid, then the web server recognizes the user and returns the requested information. For example, it will return whatever response from the API, in this case API foo. So there are a few limitations when it comes to cookie-based authentication. First thing is, if we are using a distributed system, in a distributed system there are many servers handling the same service using a load balancer, which means it's not necessary that a request from a given user will always go to the same server. It is quite possible that one request is handled by one particular server and the next request is handled by another server. In this case, using session-based authentication is very uncommon because we can't save the session info on both servers' memory. Next limitation, it comes to the performance, because storing and retrieving the session information from the database or memory is a costly process. Each time a new user authenticates, we need to store their information. And whenever a user sends a session ID with the request, then we need to validate it from the database or memory, which leads to a lot of back and forth. Finally, since we are using and saving the session ID in the user's browser cookie, it is possible that an attacker or a website could gain access to the user's cookie and then perform some malicious operations on the website, which is also known as cross-site request forgery attack.